He didn't think I would actually do it. That's the part I keep coming back to. He sat across from me at that coffee shop on Fifth, the one with the exposed brick and the overpriced lattes, and he slid a folder across the table like we were closing a real estate deal. Inside was a cashier's check, made out to me. $250,000. He looked me in the eye and said, "This is the cleanest solution for everyone." I picked up the check, looked at it for a long moment. Then I set it back down, pushed the folder across the table, and said, "I'll see you in family court." He actually laughed, like I'd made a joke. I wasn't joking. I need to back up, because you have to understand who he was before any of this makes sense. His name is Conrad. I won't give you his last name. You'll understand why in a moment. But I will tell you that he is 44 years old, that he built a commercial real estate firm from the ground up in his 30s, that his picture has been in Forbes twice, and that when he smiles at you in a room full of people, you feel like the most important person there. That's what gets you. That's the thing nobody warns you about with men like him. It's not the money, it's that they are extraordinarily good at making you feel chosen. I was 29 when we met. I'm a physical therapist. I had just finished my clinical hours, just passed my licensing exam, just signed my first lease on an apartment that was entirely mine. No roommates, no subletting, just me and my coffee maker and a cat named Louis who does not care about anyone's feelings. I was proud of myself in a way I hadn't felt in years. I was building something. I met him at a fundraiser for a children's hospital, the kind of event where the tickets cost $500 and the wine is good and everyone is dressed like they want to be photographed. My colleague had an extra ticket. I almost didn't go. Conrad was at my table. He asked about my work with genuine curiosity, not the polite kind where someone nods while looking past your shoulder, but the real kind, where he followed up, where he remembered what I'd said 20 minutes later. We talked for 3 hours. He texted me before I even got home. For 8 months, it was the best relationship I had ever been in. I'm telling you this because I don't want you to think I was naive. I wasn't some 22-year-old who got swept up in a fantasy. I was a grown woman with a career and a functioning brain, and I genuinely believed we were building something real. He said he loved me. I believed him. I still think on some level he meant it the limited way that men like him are capable of meaning anything. Then I found out I was pregnant. I was 11 weeks along when I told him. I'd spent 2 of those weeks telling myself I was wrong, then 1 week making doctor's appointments, then 1 week sitting with the information quietly, turning it over, figuring out what I actually wanted before I let anyone else's reaction influence me. What I wanted was to keep the baby. I knew it the moment I saw the ultrasound. I'm not going to dress it up in more words than that. I saw the heartbeat on that screen, and something in me just settled. I was 30 years old. I was financially stable. I had wanted children someday, and someday had arrived earlier than expected, but it had arrived. I wasn't going to walk away from it. I called Conrad that evening. I told him I had something important to tell him and asked if we could meet in person. He said he'd come to my apartment. He came in, sat on my couch, and I told him, calmly, clearly, I said I was 11 weeks pregnant and that I had decided to continue the pregnancy and I wanted to talk about what that looked like going forward. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" I said yes. He nodded slowly. He said he needed some time to process. I said that was fine. He left. He kissed me on the forehead on the way out, which I now understand was him calculating, not feeling. 3 days later, his attorney called my cell phone. I didn't even know his attorney's name before that call. She introduced herself. Her name was Miss Hargrove, and she was professional and smooth and spoke in that particular tone lawyers use when they want to sound like they're doing you a favor. She said Conrad had asked her to reach out to discuss options. She used the word options 4 times in a 2-minute phone call. She said Conrad was committed to handling things discreetly and generously. I asked what that meant specifically. She said he was prepared to offer financial support for any medical costs associated with terminating the pregnancy, plus an additional payment for my consideration and discretion. I said, "What if I don't want to terminate the pregnancy?" There was a brief pause. Then she said there were other arrangements that could potentially be discussed, but that Conrad's strong preference was a clean resolution. I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for about 40 minutes. Louis came and sat next to me, which is the most affection he has ever shown anyone, so I knew it was serious. Then I got up, made coffee, and called my sister. My sister, her name is Joanna, is 4 years older than me and works in HR and has the specific kind of personality where she immediately starts solving the problem while you're still crying about it. I love her for this. I needed exactly this. She asked me 3 questions. Was I sure about keeping the baby? Did I have documentation of the relationship, texts, emails, anything? And did I have a good OB? Yes. And I was about to get one. She said, "Okay, then the next thing you do is find a family law attorney. Not just anyone, a good one. Someone who handles high asset cases." I said I didn't know how to find that. She said, "You let me handle that part." Joanna found me an attorney named Ms. Asmat Caldwell, no relation to anyone, just a name, who had been practicing family law in our state for 19 years and who had a specific reputation for not backing down from wealthy defendants. She wore her gray hair short and had a handshake that made you feel like everything was going to be fine. I met with her the following week. I brought everything I had, every text from Conrad, every email, a photo of us at the fundraiser that had been posted on the hospital's social media, receipts from dinners and trips, a letter he had written me for my birthday in which he called me for my birthday in which he called me the woman I want to build a life with. Miss Caldwell read through all of it. Then she looked up and said, "This is a very straightforward case." I said I wasn't sure anything about this felt straightforward. She said, "Legally it is. He is the father. You are keeping the child. We establish paternity, we establish his income, and we file for child support. In this state, child support is calculated as a percentage of both parents' incomes with no hard cap. Given his documented earnings, the monthly figure will be significant." I asked about the confidentiality pressure, the attorney who'd called, the discreet resolution language. Miss Caldwell's expression didn't change. She said he can prefer discretion all he wants. He has no legal right to compel it. 2 weeks later, I ran into Conrad. I hadn't planned it. I was leaving my OB's office. I was 14 weeks by then, just starting to show if you knew what to look for. And he was walking into the building next door. We both stopped. He looked at my stomach, then at my face. He said, "I heard you got an attorney." I said yes. He said he thought we could work this out between the two of us without making it a whole thing. I said we probably could have. Back when I got that phone call from his lawyer, that ship had sailed. He lowered his voice. He said he was willing to be more generous than the initial offer, that he'd been hasty, that he wanted to sit down and talk, the two of us, no lawyers. I said I'd prefer everything to go through my attorney at this point. He said, "And I want to be precise about this because I've replayed it many times. You're making a mistake. You have no idea what it looks like to go up against me." I looked at him for a moment. I thought about the birthday letter. I thought about the fundraiser table. I thought about the cashier's check in that folder. I said, "I guess we'll find out." The coffee shop meeting was 2 weeks after that. I shouldn't have agreed to it. Miss Caldwell told me not to. But I went because part of me, the part that had loved him for 8 months, needed to see if there was anything left of the man I thought I knew. There wasn't. He came with the folder, the cashier's check, $250,000, made out to me in exchange for signing a document that would have me acknowledge paternity was unestablished and agree not to seek child support or make any public statements about our relationship. I read the document while he watched me. He was wearing a suit. His hair was perfect. He looked like someone who had handled many problems this way and expected this one to resolve the same. I set it down. I told him I wasn't signing anything. He said the amount was negotiable. I said the amount wasn't the issue. He said, "What is the issue?" I said, "My child has a father. That child deserves support. Financial and legal. What you're asking me to sign would erase that. I'm not doing it." He said I was being emotional. I picked up my coffee cup, took a sip, set it down, and said, "I'll see you in family court." He laughed. I left. I cried in my car. I want you to know that I wasn't some granite statue walking out of that meeting. I sat in the parking garage and cried for 20 minutes because I had loved this man, and this was the version of him that was real and that was genuinely, legitimately sad. Then I drove to Miss Caldwell's office and we filed the petition. Here's what I learned about family court that I did not know before this happened. In most states, there is no cap on child support, the way there is in some other legal contexts. Support is calculated based on both parents' incomes and the custody arrangement. Conrad's adjusted gross income from his most recent tax filing, which we obtained through the discovery process, was just over $3 million per year. That is not a typo. Under our state's guidelines, the support figure came out to just over $18,000 per month. I watched his attorney's face when that number came out of the calculation software. I thought about the cashier's check, $250,000 one time versus $18,000 a month for 18 years. I did not say anything out loud. Conrad contested paternity. This is standard. Miss Caldwell told me many fathers do this as a delay tactic even when they know the outcome. We had already prepared for this. I had been offered and voluntarily underwent a non-invasive prenatal paternity test at 15 weeks. It uses a blood draw from the mother and a cheek swab from the alleged father, and it is over 99% accurate. Conrad refused to submit a sample voluntarily. The court ordered it. It came back exactly as I expected. His attorney then argued that the income calculation was unfair, that the previous year had been unusually profitable, that ongoing business expenses should be deducted more aggressively, that the support figure should be based on a normalized income closer to 1.2 million. Ms. Nutt, Caldwell brought in 3 years of tax returns, 2 years of business filings, and a forensic accountant. The judge was not impressed by Conrad's attorney's arguments. There was a moment during the final hearing, and I think about this a lot, when Conrad looked at me from across the courtroom, not with anger, not with contempt, but with something that looked almost like genuine bewilderment. I don't think he had ever had someone simply refuse to go away. I don't say that with satisfaction exactly. I say it because I think it's the truest thing about this whole situation. He had a system for problems: money, pressure, legal language, social weight. It had worked before. I am confident, based on some things I learned through discovery, that I was not the first woman who had received a call from Miss Hargrove. The system worked. Until it didn't. The court issued a final support order of $14,200 per month, plus a one-time payment covering my legal fees and pregnancy-related medical costs. It was slightly less than the initial calculation because Miss Caldwell and I agreed that there was a reasonable argument for some of his business deductions. We weren't trying to punish him. We were trying to establish what was fair and legal. Conrad paid it. He didn't have a choice. My daughter was born on a Tuesday afternoon in October. She weighed 7 pounds 4 ounces. She had a full head of dark hair, and she screamed from the moment she arrived, which honestly felt correct. Joanna was in the room. My mom flew in from Phoenix. Miss Caldwell sent flowers. I named her Vera. Vera is 14 months old now. She walks by crashing into furniture and then looking at the furniture like it moved on its own. She has opinions about what she will and will not eat. Peaches, yes. Anything green, no. And she makes a sound when she's happy that I can only describe as a squeak mixed with a laugh, and it is the best sound I have ever heard. Conrad has not asked to be in her life. That is his choice, and ultimately it is his loss, though I'll be honest that it makes the logistics of my life considerably simpler. The support comes automatically on the first of every month through a wage assignment established by the court. I don't have to call him. I don't have to negotiate. I don't have to wonder if the check is coming. I bought a house, a small one, 3 bedrooms, in a good school district, which felt premature to think about for a 14-month-old, but here we are. I am that person now. I kept practicing as a PT. I hired a nanny for 3 days a week who is named Dolores and who Vera is already more attached to than is probably reasonable. It is a good life. It is a life I built on terms I chose because I refused to sign something that told my daughter she had no right to her father's name or his financial responsibility. I have thought a lot about what I would say if someone came to me and told me they were in the same situation. And here is what I landed on. The pressure to accept a lump sum and disappear is real. It is very real. $250,000 is not nothing. I am not going to pretend I wasn't tempted because I was. I sat in that parking garage and I thought about it. I thought about what it would mean to just take the money and not spend the next year in and out of a lawyer's office, not hand over my tax returns to strangers, not see my name on a court filing. But here's what that document would have done. It would have told Vera in writing, before she was even born, that her existence was something to be erased cleanly. That the man who fathered her got to simply opt out because he had enough money to make that convenient. That a check could replace 18 years of legal obligation. I couldn't sign that, not for any amount. And I want to be clear about something else, because I hear this framing sometimes. The idea that women who pursue child support are doing it for themselves, for the money, for the lifestyle. I'm not interested in defending myself against that. The support I receive every month goes into an account that pays for Vera's childcare, her health care, her future college fund. I live on what I earn as a physical therapist. I always have. This was never about money. It was about the legal and moral reality that a child has two parents, and both of those parents, regardless of relationship status, regardless of how inconvenient the timing, regardless of who has the nicer attorney, are responsible for that child's well being. Conrad understood money as power. What he didn't understand was that the law doesn't actually care how much money you have, it cares about what you owe. I still have the birthday letter, the one where he called me the woman I want to build a life with. I keep it in a folder in a filing cabinet in my home office. I'm not entirely sure why I keep it. Maybe because it reminds me that the man I fell in love with existed at some point, in some form, and the relationship was real, even if the ending was ugly. Or maybe I keep it because someday Vera might ask me questions I don't fully know how to answer yet. And I want to be honest with her about who he was, about what happened, about all of it. Not to make her angry and not to protect her from the truth, but because she deserves to understand her own story. She is her own story. She is her own story. She is not a problem that needed a clean resolution. She is a person, and she has been that from the beginning, from the moment I saw that heartbeat on a screen, from the moment I set a folder back across a coffee shop table, from the moment I walked out of a parking garage and drove to my attorney's office and said, "Okay, let's begin." She is 14 months old, and she walks by crashing into furniture, and she makes that squeak laugh sound, and she does not yet know any of this. She will, someday. And when she asks, I'll tell her. I'll tell her that I saw a check with my name on it, and I smiled, and I left it on the table. And then I went and bought her something that no one could ever take back. I've had a lot of time to think about what actually happened here. Not the legal part, not the courtroom part, but the part underneath all of it. The part about who Conrad was, who I was, and what the whole thing cost each of us. Conrad is a smart man, genuinely smart. He built something real from nothing. And that takes a certain kind of discipline that I don't want to dismiss just because of how things ended between us. But somewhere along the way, he made the mistake that a lot of people make when they accumulate enough power. He started to believe that being able to solve a problem with money meant the problem had been solved. It hadn't. It never is. You don't resolve something by paying for it to be quiet. You just delay the part where you have to reckon with it. And the reckoning always comes, one way or another, not as punishment from some outside force, but simply as the natural result of what you chose to do. Conrad chose to send an attorney to call the woman carrying his child and offer her money to disappear. That choice had consequences. They were entirely predictable consequences. He just didn't predict them because he'd never had to before. I think about the version of me who almost took the money. She was real. She sat in that parking garage for 20 minutes and did the math. $250,000 is more than I make in 4 years. I won't pretend otherwise. The temptation wasn't weakness, it was just math and fear and exhaustion at the idea of what was coming. But here's what I understood. Eventually, The check wasn't an offer of generosity, it was a document that said my daughter's existence was a problem to be managed. Signing it would have been the first thing I ever did that I was genuinely ashamed of. I would have known it every single day. And Vera would have grown up someday and found out. Because these things always come out, and she would have known it too. The intelligence part of this, the part I actually had to work at, was understanding what I was actually fighting for. It wasn't the monthly support figure, though that matters practically. It was the legal recognition that she has a father, that his responsibility to her exists whether or not it's convenient for him, that the law doesn't care how good his attorneys are. I had to learn that system. I had to ask for help. From Joanna, from Miss Caldwell, from a forensic accountant I'd never met before in my life. Knowing when you don't know something, and then going and finding the people who do, that's not a small thing. I think people underestimate how much courage that actually takes. And then there's just the staying power. The part where you show up again and again to something hard and slow and unglamorous. Family court is not a movie. It is paperwork and waiting rooms and discovery requests and someone going through your tax returns. It takes months. There were days I was so tired of it that I genuinely considered letting it go. What kept me going wasn't anger at Conrad, it was Vera. The specific, concrete, already real person she was becoming. The squeak laugh, the furniture crashes, the peach obsession. She didn't ask to be here. She didn't ask for any of this. She just arrived, and now she was mine to protect, and I was gonna do that right. I don't think I'm extraordinary for what I did. I think I just refused to let someone else's comfort be more important than my daughter's future. That's not heroism. That's just deciding one morning to keep going.